is 12 o'clock, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hope everybody can hear me. As you know, there's a chat box where you can communicate later in the session when we have a question-answer session. You can use your microphone, or you can also use this chat box. So two of you are talking at the same time. If you can mute your mic while I talk, that would be great. I think I said now we don't have the background noise from the other person. All right. So welcome to this National Postdoctoral Association webinar. My name is Marcela Hernandez, and I am one of the diversity officers of the for the MPA. There's me who has an ID call insert 4. You are not muted. I don't know if this is coming through your what your next, but I just want to mention that. Okay, so let's continue. This is the second in a series of webinars about the importance of having a diverse postdoctoral community for the advancement of research in all areas. In this presentation, we will focus specifically on implicit bias, a role that it plays in diversity outcomes. But for those of you who are not very familiar with the National Postdoctoral Association, I'd like to introduce this organization. Founded in 2003 by postdocs and for postdocs, the NPA provides a unique national voice for postdoctoral scholars. And since 2003, we have taken on an ambitious agenda to enhance the quality of the postdoctoral experience in the United States. We have assumed a leadership role in addressing the many issues confronting the postdoctoral community that are national in scope and requiring action beyond the local level. These things include training, salaries, career success, professional development. The NPA also aims to develop resources and provide community for postdoctoral scholars and postdoctoral training officers. So, core values of the NPA is diversity, as you can appreciate from the NPA diversity statement, which is the National Postdoctoral Association seeks to promote diversity and ensure equal opportunity and inclusion for all postdocs in the membership, leadership, and activities of the NPA, regardless of race, ethnicity, sex, disability, national origin, socioeconomic status, religion, sexual orientation, or gender identity. For this reason, the NPA includes in the leadership team 2 diversity officers, which currently are Vanessa Gonzalez Perez and I. Let's move on. Dr. Nancy Hopkins from Boston University, in a commencement address in 2014, said, "If you ask me to name the greatest discoveries of the past 50 years, alongside things like the internet and the Higgs particle, I would include the discovery of unconscious biases and the extent to which stereotypes about gender, race, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and age deprive people of equal opportunity in the workplace and equal justice in society." In the 2015 State of the Science Implicit Bias Review, the Kirwan Institute for the Study of Race and Ethnicity at The Ohio State University said that given the increased awareness of implicit bias, it is perhaps unsurprising that many individuals, organizations, companies, and entities have begun to seek formal education and/or trainings on this topic. I'm going to pause here a moment to remind everyone to mute their microphone because there is some noise that's coming through at the same time that I'm talking. Okay, so these quotes by Dr. Hopkins and the Kirwan Institute convey the importance of the discovery of implicit bias and the mechanisms behind it. Dr. Hopkins compares the importance of this discovery to Higgs particle due to its impact that it has had on how we understand stereotypes. Additional, this implicit bias research has allowed us to develop tools that everyone can use to reduce the negative effects of this phenomenon. So, what implicit bias? This refers to decisions and judgments our minds make without our awareness. They are unconscious, automatic, and pervasive cognitive association. Nobody is immune from this. We all do it. A large body of social science evidence has shown that implicit bias related to race, age, gender, and other identities can impact decision-making and judgments we make toward these identity dimensions. So, implicit bias goes beyond stereotyping. Other characteristics of implicit bias include that they are culturally shared, are both positive and negative. They're amplified by stress, time pressures, environments with a lack of critical mass of certain groups, and ambiguity and lack of information. Note that faculty searches, college admissions, graduate admissions, and hiring decisions are often conducted under all of these circumstances. Place implicit bias under the general rubric of stigma. And according to a study, this mechanism evolved was selected for humans to avoid poor social exchange partners, join cooperative groups, and avoid contact with those who are differentially likely to carry communicable pathogens. However, as with many of our traits, there are side effects to this ability that negative effect on modern societies. And let's explore this further. So, following studies show the impact of implicit bias on effective processes such as hiring, interviewing, admissions to medical school and graduate school. Okay. And somebody has their microphone on and we can hear background noise. So if you can please mute your microphone, great. 2014 study looked at the impact of a presenter's gender when reviewers evaluated abstracts. Female students were less likely to be assigned a higher visibility long talk slot than male students. The others allocated a male author were deemed of greater scientific quality than those allocated a female author. Perhaps more interestingly was that less than a quarter of the participants assessing the abstracts could actually recall the gender of the abstract authors. This suggests that the observed differences arose through subconscious bias. Other studies have shown that negative effect of implicit bias regarding sexual orientation and evaluation of job applicants. The study described on this slide were pairs of matched resumes that sent to almost 800 ads for 5 different occupations in 7 different states. Applicants identifying as LGBT received 40% fewer callbacks than applicants who did not identify or were not LGBT. Here, example. This is a study that shows unconscious bias phenomenon has an impact in academic environments. In the study illustrated in the slide, researchers sent fictitious emails from prospective doctoral students to professors in several fields of study, including fine arts, humanities, social sciences, natural physical sciences and math, life sciences, engineering and computer science, health sciences, human services, education, and business. The researchers investigated the impact of having students with ethnic-sounding names send emails as opposed to white-sounding names. The results revealed that professors in all fields except fine arts were more likely to respond if the sender's name sounded white and male. The same results were seen if the names were overly feminine. And fine arts, emails from women and minorities were more likely to be responded than emails from white males. So 75% compared to approximately 60%. In the other field, the emails from white males were more likely to be responded to, differences ranging from 5% more likely to get a response to more than 20% more likely to get a response, depending on the field. As I mentioned, this is part of being human. Thus is a universal phenomenon. Researchers from other countries, like this one from Spanish scholars, has documented racially biased discrepancies when rating applicants in a mock hiring scenario, showing that the concept of implicit bias is not limited to the U.S. or America. So, Spanish undergraduates were asked to rate potential candidates in a mock hiring scenario for a city position that would require a high degree of contact with this applicant. Candidates were either Spanish, Mexican, or Moroccan, and the results show racially biased discrepancies when rating applicants on the same experience levels. Okay, so I skipped a slide. So likewise, researchers in the Netherlands also have shown that racial and gender bias in employment practices have an impact. Their colleagues considered racial and gender biases in the employment realm in the Netherlands, comparing Arab populations in the Netherlands, and they found that Arab men were not recommended for jobs with high levels of client contact, suggesting that Arab women were more suited for interpersonal interactions with clients than men. So what is the ultimate impact of implicit bias? The answer to this question is of diversity. So if we examine the training of postdocs and their careers beyond the postdoc stage, we see that at every step we lose a lot of talented people. It's been referred to as a leaky pipeline. You can think of implicit bias as one of the biggest holes that at every juncture of the pipeline through which we lose women and minorities. Thus, implicit bias is one of the main factors contributing to the underrepresentation of women and other groups in research professions and careers that require a PhD degree. Can we do anything about this? We have a problem with somebody not muting their microphone.
The meetings committee, I think she may have had another intuition. I don't know if Christina knows all about that. I feel you're,
okay.
She's at least attended.
I was trying to mute person, but I can't.
I don't know how far back her meeting attendance goes back.
Amy, if you can hear me, the problem is coming from a line that identifies as National Postdoctoral Association. And you are the host now.
I'd have to go back and check, but he definitely understands the organization, especially the thing side of it.
Right. So I apologize for this next year. Okay, it went away. All right. So, can we do anything about this? Absolutely. By addressing implicit bias, we can actually minimize the negative effects that this has. Many of you may have taken the IAT, or implicit association test, which measures attitudes and beliefs that people may be unwilling or unable to report. If you've not done so already, I invite you to do that. The IAT may be especially interesting if it shows that you have an implicit attitude that you did not know about. For example, you may believe that women and men should be equally associated with science, but your automatic associations could show that you, like many others, associate men with science more than you associate women with science. Being aware of your own biases is the first required step towards biasing. So other resources that I recommend for this topic are the books that are shown in the slide, Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman and Blind Spot. These two are very good at explaining this whole phenomenon and giving examples, and also has a lot of information about how to mitigate implicit bias. Then the next step that you need to take is to bias. And by seeing experiences that could reverse the patterns that create the unwanted implicit bias, you also try to consciously plan actions that will compensate for your implicit preferences. So, for example, some of those that were listed in this slide: avoiding watching television shows that promote negative stereotypes, read materials that opposes the implicit preference that you have, build new associations through increased intergroup contact, and remain alert and minimize the influence of your overt behavior. The important thing to remember is that implicit biases are malleable, so it's possible to change them. Tools to help with this are being created. Like, for example, there's a gender bias calculator tool online, which is listed here. It will tell you if you write a letter of recommendation, it will tell you if your letter has a significant gender bias. So there's a way where you can help reduce the effect of these types of biases. And to conclude, I'm going to play the end of a TED talk about implicit biases. Hopefully this will work. So we're going to end the presentation part of the webinar. And I mentioned that this webinar is being recorded, and the slides, as well as this document that we prepared with all of the references, videos, and everything else that we mentioned in the presentation, will be available on the MPA website. Amy had put on the chat box earlier a link where you will be able to download everything, and I'm sure that we will communicate with you there to give you this link and make sure that you have access to this information. So for the rest of the time, what we want to have is a discussion, and we'd like you to participate by asking questions, or you can use, again, your microphone, and you type your question in the chat box. And for the answers, I'll be bringing along my fellow diversity officer, Vanessa Gonzalez, and our liaison to the NPA board, who also helps tremendously with the preparation for these webinars, Mahadeo Sukai, and we'll give them also the opportunity to answer your questions. So does anybody have any question or comment they'd like to make? everybody's thinking, I do want to mention that this webinar was mainly to expose the audience to these concepts and to these resources. But if you want implicit bias training per se at your site with a given group of people, there are ways of doing that. The Career One Institute at Ohio State, for example, they do a lot of trainings around the country on this topic. They can also customize it to whatever people are looking for. If they right now, for example, I am working with them on a module for graduate admissions. So we take this research and concepts and contextualize it in the graduate admissions process. So types of there's other organizations around the country that can do that type of stuff for institutions. Any institutions around the country, including my own, Ohio State, is really trying to expose faculty to these types of training, especially those who are involved in faculty searches as well as graduate admissions. And I know that they're also been training our undergraduate admissions staff.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
Okay, everybody, this is Vanessa Gonzalez Perez, and I just wanted to add that the number of resources and reports and articles around the implicit bias topics are increasing every day. The amount of literature out there is, and what we have included in the webinar, obviously, is just a small taste of it. So please do make sure that we are aware of that and we cannot keep up with everything, right? So another trend I've been seeing is that more institutions around the country are truly investing into this type of training, and where is at the postdoctoral level and graduate school level. I mean, there are so many opportunities out there to find professionals and invite them. Just start conversations and use this type of resources to get conversations started in your institution.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And again, one of the things that I have been doing here on our campus is to also give the presentations that we're doing through these webinars to our own postdoctoral scholars, because I feel that if we can get postdocs to start thinking about these things before they become faculty or leaders, then we really help this issue. Somebody did have a question. Can you please discuss structural strategies like applications to prevent implicit bias in hiring and graduate admissions? Yeah, this is, again, a lot of different resources that you can look up for this, but one of the things, for example, we are trying to do here is to start using rubrics that actually help the evaluators when they're doing hiring or when they're doing graduate admissions to quantify the non-cognitive qualities that applicants have. And they're important because I think a lot of times during this process, people read applications, but they don't have a systematic way of reading various aspects of an applicant's strengths and qualities beyond easy things like GPA or GRE. We know from many studies that have been published that those metrics are not predictive of success. So focusing on those is a mistake. I think it's as good as tossing a coin. You have a 50-50 chance of really identifying a good applicant. And so one of the things, for example, the Career One Institute has done is they have developed rubrics that people can use when they're evaluating applications, and that way there's consistency. Everyone is looking at and paying attention to the same things. I think those are some of the things that need to be done. I think one aspect of this that I have seen little conversation on, and I think is very important, is on how we integrate these types of strategies in grant review processes. We know that underrepresented minority faculty less grants than their white counterparts. It was done a couple of years ago, and as a result of that, there was a number of initiatives both at the NSF and the NIH to try to combat this. And one of the things they thought about was the mentoring aspect and the grant writing aspect, grant writing training. But one thing that they did not address, to my knowledge, is how do faculty who are involved in review and grant review, how do they do these types of things without their implicit biases playing a role in this? I think that it's time for us to reevaluate how we do all of these things, and to be fair, and to have some way of really systematically evaluate all of the applications the same way. Do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's a really good idea in terms of how do we include evaluation. Some things we do at my institution, for example, for graduate admissions, is to have an additional evaluator outside of the academic department. That is a way to balance a review of the applications and a way to sort of reduce the bias towards certain schools or certain type of candidate that some departments traditionally recruit from. Some other practices I've seen at the faculty level is to include in those faculty searches people from different levels. Try to have junior faculty itself review an application and having sometimes a few student leaders including that process. That way there's an average in terms of what is considered a good candidate, and obviously the use of rubrics always proves to be a good way to kind of not neutralize, but uniform a little bit the way, more objective way to review the candidates rather than think, oh, if it goes from this place, it might be a stronger candidate, or reducing the bias of the background.
And somebody else put something about, could another way of combating implicit bias be to include faculty members of both genders, races, etc., on the search committee? And I think that they do try doing this. The problem we have is that our faculty is not very diverse. In some departments, it's really, the number of women is very small. And what happens many times is that we overtax those minority members of the faculty because we need them in faculty searches, we need them in graduate admissions, we need them in a number of other committees. And so it's not fair to always ask the same people so that we would have a diverse group of faculty doing this. And so this is where the challenge comes, and this is why it's so important for us and for all, for all higher education institutions to think about ways they can diversify their faculty, because we need them. I mean, this diversity in faculty is going to bring more diversity at every other level. Here's another comment from somebody else who says some postdocs teach, but postdocs who the faculty will be teaching and shaping undergraduates. Are there teaching resources for STEM teachers to integrate diversity and tools for detecting and combating implicit and explicit bias for undergraduates? For example, media literacy searches, skills with the skills for reading, STEM peer-reviewed literature. I feel like these resources may exist for the humanities. Yes, I think there is a whole lot of literature out there on inclusive teaching. This is an area that more and more is getting more and more attention given the changes in the U.S. population and the expectation that soon many students in college are going to be from these underrepresented groups. So it's important to have faculty that are prepared and that are also going to be, aware of their own implicit biases. So I will make sure to look up some of these resources and add them to the list. But there is a lot of, even in classroom management, there is a lot of important things to know. It's just the way you teach or the subject that you're teaching. A lot of times there are situations that will arise in the classroom environment, and many times in postdocs or graduate students, whoever is leading the session doesn't know how to handle it. And or that's when their implicit bias is kicked in, and they might discourage a person or have a reaction that will be offensive to some of the people in the room. So a lot of these sources again are available, and I'll list some of those for you to have access to, or at least to know who are the people who are working in these fields, and that you can a lot of resources from, even invite them to campuses and give talks to your postdocs or your Vanessa.
I agree that that's a great question, and learning more about the resources at the grad level and even at the high school level are important to know them and be invented more often. So thank you for the person that made that question, and I'm looking forward to learn more about it myself.
Any other questions or comments? Well, it seems like there aren't that many questions. Again, I think a lot of this people need some time to digest and go through again the resources and explore on your own a little bit more about this. I do want to emphasize that these are important concepts that people, unless they're actually doing research in this area because they're in social sciences disciplines, are generally not very aware of. And again, this is something that affects us all, and especially affects us when we're making important decisions. And so it's one of the main in which institutions are starting to combat the lack of diversity. For a long time, we focused on the deficiency of those populations that we weren't getting into the pipeline, and to compensate for that. But the fact is that our institutions have a lot of biases in how they do things. So it doesn't matter a lot of times how good an applicant is. if we don't have this comprehensive approach that also changes how institutions operate, we can't really have diversity. Somebody said, I think many of us don't know what we don't know. Some stories that illustrate these points would be really helpful. Yeah, I think that is very true. I have to admit that when I was a postdoc and I was doing research and I was a molecular biologist and biochemist, I never thought about these things. I didn't really know what implicit bias was and how it would affect actions in the lab or beyond. And when I started about this, it really made me go back in time and see a lot of things in my career where I think this phenomenon was operating in the background, and I just didn't recognize it, and I didn't have a name for it either. I think that this is the number one step. The other thing I would say is when you take the IAT or the implicit association test, be surprised if you get results that you totally disagree with. The findings are so unconscious. We don't know that we do them. I know that when I did this, I was really surprised by my results. And this is very good in that you can test yourself against various things. It's not just race, but it also does gender, I think sexual orientation, and other things. So it's important. I think that is a very good first step for everyone, and to spread the word about this. This is free. It's online. You can do it anytime. You can do it multiple times. And it's something that is, like I said, a foundation to everything, is to first acknowledge what are my implicit biases and then try to combat them by using some of the strategies. Also, having those, looking at those mentioned, it also explores much more in depth this phenomenon, and if you're really interested on the research end of it, and it's a good way to, in going through a bunch of research papers, like they have a very good summary of everything. And the Kirwan Institute at Ohio State also produces an annual report on implicit bias, and it shows how it affects, it gives kind of a status report of the research, and it also shows some, it does have some examples in how this plays a role in so many things, from, interactions with the police, way juries in courtrooms make decisions, to hiring decisions, to college admissions decisions, etc. So again, this is a very important piece towards creating more equity. And it's not just, again, it's not just for race and gender. This is for all kinds of things. In other words, I think for us to have a fair process in either admissions or reviews of papers and grants, we really need to address this and try to find ways to either block the names. For example, when you're reviewing a paper, if you don't see who's the author, is that have an impact on how you review that paper or not? That's like an important experiment that needs to be done. There are people out there doing this kind of work to show that these processes can be changed to serve the community better.
I would add something else, Marcela. Also, myself as an underrepresented scholar, I also attest to the same story. I didn't know what I was going through until later when I started learning about what implicit biases are and the definitions. And something I wish I could have learned back in the day is that what is the appropriate reaction? What do you say in that moment to kind of correct for what the situation that is ongoing? And I think that's a completely different topic of discussion, but good thing to start thinking about. The second thing I wanted to add is that don't feel that all of you attending this webinar are taking the first step forward towards educating yourself about implicit bias. And I want to say that don't feel like you have to be an expert to bring this among your colleagues, among your postdoc groups or student groups. Because the most important part of all this is just talking about it, recognizing it, and talk with authenticity about the things that could hurt society or just not necessarily praise good candidates for the things they have achieved and know where they come from. You have to be an expert. You just can't turn on your colleagues, or if you don't feel comfortable, feel free to share this resource that we're talking, this webinar, or some of the resources. That's our contribution towards getting more people to know. And like many other people said, education is power.
Yeah, and again, even if you're from an underrepresented group, that doesn't make you immune from that. You know, we all have these biases. So it's everyone has them, and everyone can benefit from being of them and know how to mitigate them. And again, I think a lot of the discrimination that goes on, especially in our at universities and companies and nonprofit organizations, etc. A lot of that is really unconscious and not really. You know, a lot of people say I'm not a racist, but these biases and they consequences in what they say and how they act, and that's what a lot of people read, even if that's not their intention. And that's why it's such an important concept, and I think that's why this Dr. Hopkins was saying that this was a major disgrace, because it really is a phenomenon that affects so many things. And then again, I mentioned in the webinar, this is part of we as humans selected this feature because it did bring some benefits, but we need to be aware of the things that side effects, let's say, of having this tool in our brains. Okay, well, if anyone has any comments or questions, I think we're going to end the webinar. And I think Amy had put the link earlier again in the chat box where you can download a lot of these. And we will actually put together a secondary list of resources that include some of the things on inclusive teaching and classroom management for those who are interested in that. Hopefully you can use these tools that we're providing you to continue the word around your institutions and help us create a more equitable environment for everyone. Inez, do you have anything to add?
No, I just want to thank all of you for attending the we are excited to start this new thing, and we will love your feedback. You can contact us separately, and we will try to follow up shortly with a very, very brief survey. We understand that the quality of the sound was not optimal during the webinar, but if we maybe possibly have the chance to re-record and have a better product out there for you to utilize in your institutions later, we will try to do so. Thank you, and thank you, Marcela.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.